Does the new iPhone 16 overheat? Now, during the Apple announcement, they said that the iPhone 16 Pro has 20% better sustained performance. Now, when you put this side by side with the last several generations of iPhone, as well as the greatest Android phone you can possibly buy.
Hey, wait a minute. What's that Z Flip doing there?
We're comparing against the Z Flip, right?
No, you said greatest. Nuh-uh. Get it out
I
of
mean,
there.
when you compare it against the Galaxy S24 Ultra, the pinnacle of the Android lineup, we're gonna find out a couple of things here. Does the iPhone overheat? What kind of performance does it have? And there's something very unusual going on that we found in our testing. We're getting into the weeds today, my friends, and something ain't right. So to start with, let's just do a very simple run of benchmarks, starting with Geekbench. So right here I have an iPhone 13, 13 Pro, 14, 14 Pro, 15, 15 Pro, 16, 16 Pro, and of course a Galaxy S24 Ultra. Now we have already run these benchmarks a couple times off camera, so we're gonna average all of the scores. But essentially what you should see, first and foremost with Geekbench, is a little bit of an idea of regular use on these phones and how that compares. So at first glance, this seems all pretty straightforward, besides AirDrop wanting to enable. So both the 16 and the 16 Pro easily went out here, especially when it comes to single core. The S24 falls a little bit behind on that, but multi-core is quite strong. A little bit more of a relevant benchmark is 3D Mark. So this is going to be a real test of what the gaming performance is theoretically on each of these phones. And I am running Solar Bay, which is a moderately powerful benchmark. It's not the most powerful one in the 3D Mark suite, but it is the only benchmark that will run on all of these devices. Now, at first glance, it seems pretty clear that the Galaxy S24 actually has a major lead when it comes to graphics performance. And while the 15 Pro and 16 Pro are all sort of in the ballpark, when you step down to a 15 or older, you're losing a lot of performance when it comes to gaming. Now this is very valuable data, but I'll be honest with you, a 60-second 3D Mark test only tells you part of the story. Gaming is a really big deal for Apple, and it's easy to underestimate. iPhone games might be frowned upon as casual, but it is a huge business. Apple, of course, has their own gaming service with Apple Arcade, which despite keeping a surprisingly low profile, it is essentially Apple's version of Xbox Game Pass, with premium games that have no ads. Now, talking about Apple Arcade might seem like a little bit of a tangent, but stick with me for just a second, because what puts this in context is the sheer scale of Apple and the gaming industry. With estimated revenues, just from gaming mind you, of between $15 and $20 billion a year, thanks to Arcade and a whole bunch of Candy Crush tokens, Apple is in the same ballpark as giants such as Nintendo and Microsoft. Let that settle in for a second, right? The numbers just don't lie. An enormous percentage of the world's population plays mobile games, with stats that I've seen suggesting that upwards of 80% of smartphone users game at least occasionally. Now, it is easy, as I kind of just did, to dismiss mobile gaming as just Candy Crush and Clash of Clans, but like, the market is so much more than that nowadays. And the iPhone, if it's going to be successful, it kind of needs to be a great gaming phone. For context, it has been 5 years since the launch of Call of Duty Mobile, and newer games such as Genshin Impact, Pokemon Unite, Honkai Star Rail, ZZZ, they're pushing mobile graphics to levels that aren't that far removed from consoles. And we're talking about games that take advantage of techniques like ray tracing, TAA, they have high quality graphics, and some of these titles can even run at high frame rates such as 120 FPS. Now I recently took a look at the Red Magic 9S Pro, and while it's a device with some flaws, it does make a bit of a statement about the mobile gaming market. It is designed for gamers. It's got triggers, it's got an active cooler, and while obviously I think someone who's buying a Red Magic is not the same person who's buying an iPhone, it brings me back to why I think it is crucial for the iPhone to deliver gaming performance without overheating. If you watch an Apple keynote, they love to showcase examples of high-profile games like Death Stranding and Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil all running on the iPhone 16. But it's important to understand that the demands of a game are totally different from typical workloads. Usually, a smartphone will briefly boost its processor clock speed to quickly render a web page or handle a scroll through Instagram, then immediately race down to idle to conserve battery. These bursty workloads rarely cause the phone to heat up enough to throttle during normal use, which is why benchmarks like Geekbench are great to demo normal performance on a device. Gaming, however, is a completely different story. Games place a sustained, often near 100% load, not just on the GPU, but also they heavily tax the CPU, the memory, and storage. This is exactly why companies like Samsung make such a big deal about their vapor chamber cooling systems, and why dedicated gaming phones like the ROG phone incorporate either actual fans in the phone or as an external accessory. Something much like this. So this is a Red Magic 5 Pro cooler. Now while this is a little bit of a higher end option, the pitch is really good. If you're going to be gaming with your phone, phones tend to get hot, and what this is not only just a fan, it's an actual refrigerated cooler. So this cooling pad is below zero, which means that when you snap it onto your phone, this particular one has MagSafe, it keeps your phone icy cold. Or at least that's the pitch. But something weird happens when you connect this to an iPhone. Boy oh boy, after running a bunch of benchmarks, there's a lot of really interesting stuff. So first of all, I ran Call of Duty Mobile for about 5 to 10 minutes on each of these devices. Surprise, surprise, even on the max graphic settings, none of the phones get all that warm to the point where you're going to be significantly throttling. I think a more interesting test is something like the 3D Mark Steel Nomad test. So this is absolutely maxing these phones out. These phones are running at like 10 to 12 FPS. Now I use this as a benchmark for a couple of reasons. One of which is, it is a good representative of the kind of games that will be coming, right? Any of these phones will be able to play every single game in the Play Store or the App Store today. But what they will not be able to do necessarily is play Genshin 2 in 2027 or Minecraft 2 in 2015. So with Steel Nomad, we ran a stress test. So this is about sustained performance. It's not about a 1-minute test where the phones don't even get warm. This is the sustained test. And the results are really interesting. First and foremost, the iPhone 16 Pro wins, hands down. Not only is it the best when it comes to outright performance when it's nice and cool, but even when it warms up, it has significantly more performance than any of the other phones. And I gotta say, Apple claims it is gonna be 20% better in sustained performance than the 15 Pro. Guess what? In the score, it is 21% better. Something else that's interesting is that the regular iPhone 16 is actually not too far off. Even though in outright performance, it's a little bit behind, but once you actually start to throttle, it only dropped 12% of its performance after 20 minutes of a stress test. Now what I think that means is that these phones are very efficient, the new 16 and the 16 Pro. What you're getting here is more performance per watt, because every single smartphone is going to throttle. Like, that is the way it works. When you throw a 100% load at it, the thermal solution can only dissipate so much heat. And what we're seeing is that these iPhone 16s are very efficient. And what's really interesting is that the Galaxy S24 Ultra, even with its massive heatsink, drops a ton of performance when you are doing sustained 100% load gaming. Now, of course, will that be different with the Galaxy S25 Ultra in a few months? Almost definitely, but I can only test what I've got right here today. I did not expect, without a vapor chamber and all the kind of fancy stuff, the 16 Pro to be such a big improvement. But there's one last thing I want to talk to you about, right? We know how the phones perform in a ideal benchmark when they're nice and cool. We know how the phones perform when they're getting hammered with a 100% load and they're completely sort of scalding hot in your hand. But what about when you attach a cooler? I'm curious because some of the results we saw with this on older iPhones made absolutely no sense. Yeah, it's the same thing with the iPhone 16 Pro. This cooler does not give you more performance. Yes, the phone itself is cold, ice cold to the touch. But whether it's the battery gets too cool, whether it's some clever Apple sensors like, hey, I don't like this temperature, whatever, you do not see real gaming performance. In fact, you actually see, especially on some of the older iPhones, worse performance with a cooler compared to no cooler at all. So I guess that's the first takeaway from this video. If you use an Android phone, these things are great. Wonderful, helps a lot, does a lot. If you're using an iPhone, a cooler like this either does not give you any performance benefit at all, or actually makes the performance worse than without a cooler. Now, the other thing is the iPhone 16 Pro, generally speaking. And I gotta say, I didn't think I was gonna say this when we started this video. Apple are kinda doing a good job here. If you look at it on the surface, the Galaxy S24 Ultra has better gaming performance, right? In the Solar Ray benchmark, it outperformed the iPhone 16 Pro. However, if you do a real sustained test, so we did the 20-minute stress test, and at that point, the S24 Ultra can't keep up. Even with this vapor chamber, it throttles a lot. Whereas the iPhone, while it throttles a little bit, has a much higher level of sustained performance. So if you take that as a benchmark, right, of what a phone can deliver after 20 minutes of hardcore gaming, the iPhone 16 Pro is 20% faster than both the iPhone 15 Pro and the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Which means this iPhone 16 Pro is an actually good gaming phone. it gets a little bit warm, it does do a little bit of throttling, but it throttles significantly less than something like the S24 Ultra, mostly because it is an incredibly efficient chip. That is a fascinating result that I did not expect when we started this video. What do you think about the iPhone 16 and all of Apple's very many claims to be an excellent gaming phone? I was very skeptical when we started this video, but now that we spent some time and tested it, it's legit.